I bought the garage because I was tired of renting space for other people's decisions. For 10 years, I'd paid monthly on a townhouse I didn't love, a minivan I didn't pick, and a life that always seemed one surprise away from overdraft. When the detached two-bay garage came up behind an old duplex near my job, I treated it like a spreadsheet problem. Purchase price, $28,000. Taxes, manageable. A little roof work. It wasn't a dream, it was a buffer. Somewhere to store tools, maybe flip a few engines on weekends for extra cash. My wife, Megan, said it was cute that I wanted a man shed. But her laugh had that edge, like she already knew I'd be the one paying for it. I put $12,000 down from our emergency fund and financed the rest through a local credit union at 2%. I told myself the interest was still cheaper than chaos. Part 2. The garage belonged to an estate. The owner, Mr. Dwyer, had died and his niece handled the sale. She didn't come to closing. She sent a realtor who looked bored flipping papers. The garage was as is, which in my head meant some junk, maybe old paint cans, probably mice. I walked in the first evening with a headlamp and gloves. The air was stale, like cold oil and wet cardboard. There were shelves of rusted bolts and coffee cans, broken lawn chairs, a stack of yellowed newspapers. In the back corner under a stained tarp was the outline of something long and low. I pulled the tarp off and my throat went dry. A motorcycle, not a hobby bike. Classic. The tank had a faded emblem I recognized from my uncle's posters. I didn't touch it at first. I just stood there listening to the distant traffic and my own breathing, like I'd stumbled onto somebody else's secret. It was dusty but intact. Chrome dulled, tires flat, leather seat cracked like dry earth. I took pictures and texted my friend Calvin, who flips cars and knows everyone in town who knows anything. He called immediately. "Don't post those online," he said. "Where'd you get that?" I told him. There was a pause. Then he said, "If that's what I think it is, you just paid for your kid's college." I laughed because it sounded ridiculous. He showed up the next day with a flashlight and a magnet, crouched beside it like a surgeon. He traced the frame numbers, wiped grime off the engine stamp. "Triumph," he whispered, like saying it too loud would jinx it. Late 60s. Could be rare. Could be very rare. He looked up at me. "Do you have clear title to what's in here?" I said the garage was mine, contents included. He didn't smile. "That's not always how it works. Money has a sound. For me, it's not coins or cash. It's Megan's sigh when I mention a bill. Our household ran on unspoken math. Megan worked part-time at a dental office, mostly for the insurance. I was salaried in operations at a logistics company, the kind of job where you put out fires quietly so nobody notices you exist. We had 2 kids, 8 and 5. We had daycare costs, a mortgage, her student loans, my lingering credit card debt from a layoff years ago. I'd been the one pushing responsible for so long it felt like a personality trait. That night, I told Megan about the bike in a calm voice, like it was a funny find. She didn't ask if it ran. She asked, "How much do you think it's worth?" Her eyes did something I hadn't seen in a while. Focus, like a lock turning. Calvin connected me with a vintage bike appraiser named Ron. Ron smelled like cigarette smoke and peppermint gum and handled the bike with reverence. He didn't start it. He didn't need to. He checked numbers, took photos, muttered about matching. When he straightened up, he said, "If it's authentic and you can prove provenance, you're in the 6 figures." My mouth went dry. Megan gripped my elbow hard enough to hurt, like she was steadying herself. Ron added, "But you need to be careful. A bike like this doesn't just sit forgotten. There are usually people." Megan laughed too loud. "People like who?" Ron shrugged. "Family, collectors, anyone owed money." He gave me his card and said, "If you sell, do it right. Taxes, escrow, no side deals." After he left, Megan stared at the bike like it was a lottery ticket. "We could pay off the credit cards," she said. "We could finally breathe." I wanted to agree. Instead, I heard Calvin's earlier warning echoing. Part 6. The first twist came as a letter taped to the garage door 3 days later. A simple envelope with my name printed neatly, no return address. Inside was a single page. Notice of lien claimed against personal property stored at 1842, Dover Lane Garage. It referenced a mechanic's lien filed years ago by a shop called Dover Cycle and Marine for unpaid repairs on a Triumph motorcycle. VIN listed. The amount wasn't huge, $4, $860 plus interest. But the language chilled me. Possession disputed, sale prohibited. My hands shook as I read it twice. Megan snatched it from me and said, "This is a scam." But the VIN matched what Ron had written down. I called the number on the notice. A man answered, older voice, careful. "You got my lien notice," he said. "That bike's not yours to sell." I asked why he waited so long. He said, "Because the person who owed me kept promising. Then he died. And now you show up." I drove to Dover Cycle and Marine, a cinderblock building with faded signs. The man, Hank, was in his 70s with hands stained permanent gray. He brought out a file folder thick with receipts and handwritten notes. The repairs dated back to 2009. "Mr. Dwyer brought it in," Hank said, tapping the paper. "Said he was restoring it for someone. Paid a deposit, then stopped." I asked why he didn't take the bike. Hank gave me a look like I was young and stupid. "You can't just take," he said. "You file. You wait. You do the paperwork so you don't end up in court." I filed the lien. Then the shop changed owners, paperwork got messy, and honestly, I figured it was gone. Till my nephew sees a listing for a garage sale in the neighborhood and tells me you bought Dwyer's garage. My stomach dropped. "So what do you want?" Hank said, "I want what I'm owed. Then it's yours," assuming it was his to begin with. I paid Hank. Felt like buying my own fear back. $5,400 after interest. Megan was furious I didn't negotiate. "Why are you giving away money when we haven't even sold it?" She hissed in the kitchen while the kids watched cartoons. I kept my voice flat. "Because if the lien is valid, we can't sell. And if we sell anyway, it's fraud." Megan stared at me, jaw tight. "You always do this," she said. "You make everything complicated so nothing ever changes." That stung because part of it was true. I wanted control more than I wanted relief. Still, after I paid Hank, I felt lighter for a day. I even imagined the false resolution. Sell the bike legally, pay off debt, refill the emergency fund, maybe take the kids somewhere without checking the account balance. I listed a few things to sell from the garage, cleaned up, started researching auction houses. Then Megan started hovering, asking when the money would hit, like she'd already spent it in her head. Twist 2 arrived in the form of a voicemail from an unknown number. A woman's voice, strained but controlled. "This is Lila Dwyer. I hear you found my father's motorcycle. You need to call me back. This is urgent." I didn't know Mr. Dwyer had a daughter. The estate paperwork said niece. When I called back, she answered on the second ring like she'd been holding the phone. She said her father had a secret child, her, and the niece had handled the estate because Lila was out of state and not involved. Her tone made those phrases sound like knives. "That motorcycle was in a trust," she said. "It wasn't supposed to be sold with the garage." I told her I had a bill of sale for the property and contents. She inhaled sharply. "You have no idea what you stepped into," she said. "My father used that bike as collateral. There's paperwork. People." There was that word again. People. I sat in my car outside work, palms slick on the steering wheel, feeling like the garage had swallowed me. That night, Megan listened with crossed arms while I told her. She didn't look scared. She looked annoyed. "So we'll give her some of it," she said. "We'll cut her a check and be done." I said it wasn't that simple. If the bike was collateral, someone might have a secured interest, and if the trust existed, we could be dragged into probate. Megan snapped. "Since when are you a lawyer?" The next morning, I paid $350 for an hour with a real estate attorney. He scanned my documents and frowned. "Your contract says contents included, but estates can't sell what they don't own free and clear," he said. "If there's a lien or security interest recorded, it follows the property. If a trust claims it, that's another fight. You may have to interplead proceeds if you sell." I asked if I could just return it and unwind the sale. He shook his head. "The garage is yours. The motorcycle, is complicated. That word again. Complicated. Felt like my life soundtrack. Part 11. Twist 3 wasn't about the bike directly. It was about Megan. 2 weeks into this, I logged into our online banking to move money for the attorney retainer and saw our savings was lower than it should have been. Not a little. Thousands. My chest tightened. I clicked through transactions. Cash withdrawals, cashier's checks, payments to something labeled Brightstone. I asked Megan that night after the kids were asleep. I kept my tone even, almost gentle, like I was approaching a skittish animal. "What's Brightstone?" Megan's eyes flicked away. "It's nothing," she said too fast. My mouth went dry. "It's not nothing. It's our savings." She sat down heavily at the table and rubbed her forehead. "It's a loan," she said. "I borrowed against my 401k. I needed to. The words hit like a punch. "For what?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. When she did, it came out flat. "To cover the credit cards. And something else." I waited. My hands were shaking under the table. Finally she said, "I got behind. I thought I could catch up before you noticed." The something else was a private lender, Brightstone, a predatory consolidation company she'd found online after maxing out a card I didn't know about. She'd taken a $22,000 loan at an obscene rate using our joint account history, and this part made me nauseous. My electronic signature she had access to because the accounts were linked. "I didn't forge," she said quickly, seeing my face. It's the same login." I counted. I couldn't speak for a moment. Shame and anger tangled in my throat. I wanted to believe her. I also knew she'd clicked accept on something that bound us. She cried quietly, not dramatic, just exhausted. "I did it because I was drowning," she whispered. "And then you came home with a motorcycle worth 6 figures, and I thought, finally, something breaks our way." I stared at her and realized she wasn't excited about the bike as a miracle. She was excited because she'd already promised the money to someone else. I made a morally questionable choice. I didn't tell the attorney about Megan's loan right away. I told myself it wasn't relevant. I started planning how to sell the bike fast and discreetly to get cash before Brightstone could garnish or freeze anything. I rationalized that paying them off would protect us. It would buy time. Calvin warned me, "Don't rush. You rush, you get robbed." But every time the phone rang, my stomach jumped. Brightstone started calling the house. Megan stopped answering. I could feel the pressure in the walls like humidity before a storm. Lila Dwyer texted me photos of trust documents and threatened to file an injunction. Hank called once to ask if I'd decided what to do, and his voice carried disappointment like I'd personally insulted him. The bike sat under a new tarp, silent and heavy, like a weight we couldn't lift. Part 14. The false resolution came when an auction house in Chicago agreed to take it on consignment if we could provide a clean chain of ownership. Their specialist sent an email, estimated hammer price, $120,000 to $160,000 depending on originality. I felt dizzy reading it. Megan actually smiled, a real one, for the first time in months. "We're going to be okay," she said, and for a few hours I let myself believe it. Then Twist 4 hit. The auction house's compliance team flagged a UCC filing, Mr. Dwyer had used the motorcycle as collateral for a personal loan in 2017. The lender was still active, and the outstanding balance was $68,000. The bike wasn't just valuable. It was already spoken for. When I told Megan, she went pale, then strangely calm. "So we sell it and pay them," she said. "We keep the rest." I called the lender. They weren't interested in the rest. They said if the collateral was sold without their consent, they'd pursue full remedies. My hands trembled holding the phone. The room felt smaller. Everything collapsed slowly, like a ceiling sagging before it falls. Lila filed in probate, the lender filed a claim, and Brightstone, smelling blood, sent a notice about default because Megan had missed payments while waiting for the motorcycle money. My attorney told me to stop talking to anyone and let the court sort it. Sorting it meant fees. Sorting it meant months. Sorting it meant the bike, the thing that had felt like rescue, became a file number. Megan moved into the guest room. We didn't scream. We did the quiet version of breaking. Separate grocery trips, separate bank logins, stiff politeness in front of the kids. Eventually, the court ordered the motorcycle sold, proceeds distributed. Lender first, then estate claims, then whatever scraps were left. There weren't many scraps. Enough to pay part of Brightstone and my attorney. Not enough to erase what Megan had done or what I'd tried to do. The garage is still mine. I go there some nights and sit in the empty bay where the bike was. The concrete still has a dark oval stain where oil dripped for years, like a shadow that won't wash out. Sometimes I catch myself listening for a sound that isn't coming. An engine turning over, a check clearing, a life restarting. And all I hear is my own breathing and the soft, steady drip of something I can't find. I thought the empty garage would feel like relief once the bike was gone. No more letters taped to the door, no more certified mail, no more calls that made my stomach seize. Instead, it felt like standing in a room after a fight where all the furniture's been pushed back into place but the air still smells burned. I kept expecting some official moment where it would finally be over. A last signature, a last payment, closure. That never came. The financial damage didn't end with the court order. It just spread out, quieter but deeper. Brightstone restructured Megan's loan into something they called a hardship plan, which was just a prettier name for a longer leash. Higher total cost, lower monthly payment, more years. Every statement reminded me that the motorcycle money had been spoken for long before I ever touched the tarp. I paid it because not paying would have meant wage garnishment, and I couldn't let that hit with the kids watching. I told myself that was me being responsible. Some nights it felt more like surrender. Megan and I tried counseling, the kind covered by insurance where the therapist keeps glancing at the clock. We talked about trust like it was a cracked plate you could glue back together if you were careful. She said she never meant to hurt me. I said I believed her, and I did in a narrow technical sense. Intention wasn't the problem. Fear was. Her fear of money, my fear of losing control. We took turns apologizing for different parts of the same mess. But the apologies didn't line up. Mine were about secrecy. Hers were about desperation. Neither one fixed the other. I kept replaying early moments with new understanding. The way she'd brushed off my questions about statements. The way she latched onto the bike's value immediately, not the story of it. I thought she was just tired of scraping by. Now I saw how long she'd been quietly panicking. How long I'd mistaken silence for stability. That realization came with its own shame. I liked being the calm one. I liked believing I had a handle on things. Turns out I just wasn't looking in the right places. The kids adjusted faster than we did. They didn't know details, just that mom and dad were working on stuff, and that some weekends felt heavier than others. My oldest asked once why I went to the garage so much when there was nothing in it. I told him I was organizing. He nodded like that made sense. Later, alone, I stood there staring at bare walls and realized organizing was exactly what I'd been trying to do my whole life. Line things up so nothing surprised me. The motorcycle had blown that illusion apart. Megan eventually moved back into our bedroom, but something stayed separate. Not just space, but accounting. We split finances more cleanly after that, a practical decision that also felt like an admission. We were still married, still functioning, but no longer merged the way we'd been. Sometimes that felt like progress. Sometimes it felt like a quiet retreat neither of us wanted to name. I ran into Hank once at the hardware store. He recognized me, nodded, didn't bring up the bike. I thanked him again for the paperwork being straight. He said, "Sometimes doing it right still costs you." It wasn't advice, just a fact. Lila Dwyer never contacted me again after the sale. I like to imagine she got something out of it, closure maybe, but I know better now than to invent neat endings for other people. Every month when I make payments, I still think about that first night in the garage. The tarp sliding back, the shock of finding something valuable where I expected trash. I thought that kind of discovery was rare, almost magical. Now I understand how often it happens with money, just in reverse. You think you know what's there. You think you've counted it, planned for it, earned it. Then one day you pull something back and realize there's a whole other story underneath, already in motion, already costing you. The stain on the concrete never fully faded. I tried degreaser, pressure washing, even paint. It always bleeds through, darker around the edges. I tell myself it's just oil, just chemistry. But when I'm honest, it feels more like a reminder. Not of the bike itself, but of the moment I thought money might finally solve something for us, and how quietly it proved that it couldn't. The goodbye didn't happen all at once. It stretched out, thinned into small, ordinary moments that were impossible to point to and say, "This is the end." There were no suitcases by the door, no dramatic announcement, just a slow unlearning, of shared mornings, of telling her things automatically, of thinking in terms of we, a word that had once felt financially and emotionally inseparable. The last real conversation happened late at night in the kitchen. The kids were asleep. The light above the stove hummed the way it always did. We talked calmly, almost clinically, about numbers, about payment schedules, about how tired we both were of living in constant cleanup mode. She said she couldn't keep looking at me and seeing disappointment, even when I said nothing. I said I couldn't keep looking at her and mentally calculating what else might disappear. We didn't accuse each other out loud. That was the hardest part. When there's no clear villain, there's no relief. Just an empty space where certainty used to live, and no amount of money can fill that. We agreed to separate like adults. No scorched earth, no drawn-out court fights if we could avoid them. We sold the house, paid down what we could, split the remaining debt. I kept the garage. Not out of sentiment, but because it was the only asset that was still clearly legally mine. She said that was fair. I wasn't sure fairness even applied anymore. The day she took the last boxes, I stood in the hallway and watched the shoe rack empty out. Such a small thing. But that was when the goodbye finally landed. Not to her exactly, but to the idea that if you plan carefully enough, life won't break pattern. Now we talk briefly and practically. About the kids. About bills. About schedules. No subtext. No hope hiding between sentences. In some ways, it's easier than before. I still go to the garage. I sit on the same old stool and look at the stain on the concrete. I think about how easy it is to confuse a discovery with a rescue, and how much harder it is to say goodbye, not to a person but to a version of life you invested years in and never saw a return on.